Hello everybody, my name is Ilya.
My name is Tyler. Together we make up Kovray, a couple that loves to play board games.
And today we'll teach you how to play Aspens and all of its expansions.
Whoa. Aspens is a two-player game designed by Neil Edwards and Luke Roberts. It's published by Ludivore Games, who helped sponsor this video.
And it can be a 4-player game with one of the expansions.
This one?
Yeah. Let's go to the table and let's learn how to play. As always, you'll begin by setting up. Each player will pick a tree type, either aspen or pine, and take the corresponding bag of tree pieces. You'll then put the main board together using the 7 board tiles. Start with the center and place tiles in their correct position so it looks something like this. Next, you'll place the 3 water tiles in these specific spaces. Choose a first player, and you're now ready to begin seeding the starting forests. Each player will take 3 trees from their bags. Starting with the first player, you'll take turns each placing 1 tree on an empty space adjacent to one of the 3 water tiles. You'll keep taking turns until you both have placed all 3 of your trees adjacent to different water tiles. You may not place more than 1 tree by the same water tile in this step. As a tip, it's wise to place your trees closer to the center of the board. Next, you'll grow your starting forests. You'll each take 4 trees from your bag. Starting with the first player, you'll now place all 4 of your trees among the 3 existing spaces. After this step, you'll each have 7 trees on the board in 3 different spaces. You're now ready to play. In Aspens, your goal is simple: grow the largest forest. Every turn, you'll roll dice and plant new trees, expanding into various sections of the board. You'll win the game if you claim the most spaces on the board by the end of the game, which triggers when the board is full of trees. Now, this game is played in turns, and each turn has 4 steps. Let's go over them. Step 1. Roll for sun and wind. At the start of your turn, you'll roll both the sun and wind dice. The sun die will determine which of your spaces will produce new trees, while the wind die will determine which direction you can plant new trees. Step number 2. Gaining trees. This action is taken by both players. You'll count the number of your spaces that have at least a number of trees as the value of the sun die. You'll take this many trees and add them to your active supply from your bag. The player whose turn it is will take an extra tree as a bonus. Step number 3. Plant your new trees. Only the current player will get to do the step. When placing new trees, how and where you plant each tree is an independent choice. For every tree you place, you'll have 2 options. Number 1, grow up. You can place a tree on any space you already own, adding it to your existing trees there. The wind die does not affect this option. The reason you may want to do this is to increase your chances of acquiring new trees in the future. Option number 2, grow out. Here you can place a tree on any valid empty space using the wind. For a space to be valid, it needs to be adjacent to a space you already own and in the valid wind direction. The valid directions for the wind are the direction you rolled and the adjacent directions to either side of it. So if you rolled northeast, you can place new trees northeast, northwest, and east. When you plant a tree on an empty space, you immediately control that space, meaning you can now plant adjacent to it. Water tiles may not be planted on. They are not empty spaces. Additionally, you don't have to plant all your trees, although most of the time it is beneficial to do so. Once you finish placing your trees, you'll move on to the next step. Step number 4. You'll now check for and resolve cascades. When you close off an area of the board, making it impossible for another player to reach, you've created a cascade. When this happens, you'll immediately claim all the surrounded spaces for free. Place trees from your bag in each of the spaces in the cascade. You'll now pass the dice to your opponent, who will complete the same 4 steps. As a reminder, each turn, you'll both gain new trees from the sun die, but only the active player will plant new trees that turn. You'll keep playing, taking turns, acquiring and planting new trees until there are no remaining empty spaces on the board. At this point, the game ends. You'll now count up how many spaces each player owns. An easy way to do this is to remove any additional trees from your spaces so that each only has 1. Then, simply count each player's trees. If you want to check to make sure you got all the spaces, your total for both players should add up to 148. At this point, you'll compare the spaces you own. The player with the most wins. If tied, play again to break the tie. Now, once you're familiar with the game, you can try one of the varied setups. You can choose one of the 5 you wish to play, or simply roll the sun die and play with a setup that matches the number. Now let's dive into the expansion, starting with Majestic Marvels. This expansion changes how the game is scored and will have you competing for control of multiple areas of the forest. Other than how the game is scored, the base rules still apply and remain unchanged. To set up Majestic Marvels, you'll flip 3 of the board tiles to the night side so it's easier to differentiate between the 6 outer sections of the board, which you'll be scoring. The center segment will not be scored in this game. Before you seed and grow your initial forests, you'll shuffle the Marvel cards and randomly deal 1 to each of the 6 outer sections, along with an aid card matching that section. You can tuck both of these under each corresponding section of the board for easier reference. You'll now seed and grow your forests and begin playing. Now, as soon as one player controls a majority of spaces in a segment as marked in the reference card, they'll claim the Marvel card into their play area. Different Marvel cards are worth different amount of Majesty points, which will influence how you'll approach your strategy. Once all 6 segments and their Marvels have been captured, the game comes to an end. Each player counts up their combined total Majesty points from all of their Marvel cards. The player with the most wins. Any ties are broken by the player who controls the majority of the center segment. Now let's move on to the next expansion, Ancient Artifacts. In Ancient Artifacts, you'll collect lost relics on the board, granting you a unique single-use ability, giving you another layer of strategy to consider when making your moves. Now the objective and the gameplay are the same as the base game with this expansion. Let's set up. During setup, before seeding your initial forests, you'll place all 16 relic discs into the bag and randomly pull out 6, one at a time, and place them in these 6 locations. For each of the 6 relic discs placed, take the corresponding ancient spirit card and place it near the board in reach of all players. If Drought and Stone is in play, place the 2 drought markers with it. Now take a moment to familiarize yourself with each of the abilities on the cards prior to seeding and growing your initial forests, as the powers may influence your strategy. You're now ready to play. The board should look exactly the same as a normal game setup, just with the addition of the 6 relic discs and nearby spirit cards. Now how do you collect relic discs and unlock the powers? Well, you'll need to be the first player to place 4 of your trees adjacent to a relic disc. Once you do, you'll immediately take the disc as well as the corresponding spirit card. You may now use the power of that spirit on any future turn, but you may only use it once this game. Now the 4 trees to claim relic tokens can be in any configuration. Additionally, if you cascade a relic, you'll gain it immediately. However, it's important to note that relic spaces are not considered boundaries and they cannot be used to create a cascade. Additionally, you cannot play on spaces with relic discs until the disc has been taken. Now let's talk about the powers. All powers may be played any time on your turn. You may use multiple powers on a single turn, and the powers you use are in addition to your turn. You'll still take the same 4 steps you're used to. The only reminder we'll mention here is you cannot use the powers the same turn you acquire them. You have to wait until at least your next turn. Let's go over the powers. The Sun, when used, will give you the ability to set the value of the Sun die to any value of your choice. Both players will still generate trees based on this value. The Wind, when used, will give you the ability to set the value of the Wind die in any direction you'd like. You can do this anytime before you have planted your first tree. You cannot change wind direction in the middle of planting your trees. The Spring Waters, when used, instantly grant you 2 trees from your bag. The New Growth, when used, will grant you the ability to place 1 of your trees on any empty space. It does not have to be adjacent to your existing spaces, and it does not have to follow the wind. The Wither, when used, will grant you the ability to remove all of your opponent's trees from a single space. The trees then are returned to your opponent's bag. The only restrictions for choosing the space is that it cannot be adjacent to the starting water tile. Traveling Roots, when used, will grant you the ability to plant a single one of your trees 2 spaces away from a space you control. You must still follow valid wind directions. You may use more than 1 valid wind direction, and you may move through your opponent's spaces when making this move. Drought and Stone, when used, will grant you 2 drought tiles, which can be placed on any 2 empty spaces on the board. These spaces can now not be played on. Droughts are considered boundaries and they can be used to create cascades. And finally, Fertile Breeze. When activated, this power will grant you the ability to plant a single tree any number of spaces away from a space you control following a single valid wind direction. And that's Ancient Artifacts. Now, it's time for Wild Weather. This expansion adds dice-based weather effects and powers, which you can utilize on your turn. The objective is the same as the base game. The game is played and scored in the same way, where you'll aim to control the most forest spaces on the board by the end of the game. However, the weather throws in some twists. To set up for this expansion, before seeding and growing your initial forests, you'll lay out all 6 weather effect boards as well as the tracks for Mudslide and Torrential Rain. You'll then roll all 6 weather effect dice and place them on the corresponding cards. These values will remain unchanged for the entire game, and will influence which cards you may want to draft this game. For Mudslide and Sunbeam, you'll place all the related marker tiles next to their boards. For Torrential Rain and Cold Snap effects, you'll take the number of corresponding marker tiles equal to the value rolled on the corresponding dice and place them next to their boards. Then, starting with the first player, you'll take turns choosing one weather effect and taking all of its related components until both of you have 2 in your play area. You'll return the remaining 2 weather effects and any matching components back to the box. They will not be used in this game. For your first game, we recommend you play with Tornado, Cold Snap, Gusting Winds, and Torrential Rain, as they're easiest to get started with. Once drafted, you'll seed and grow your initial forests, and you're now ready to begin. You'll play the game as you do normally, however you can now activate your weather effects power at any time during any of your turns, after the roll for wind and sunstep, as long as you follow the rules of the power. Additionally, you can use both your powers on the same turn, and activating your powers does not count as your action. You'll still follow your turn structure as usual in addition to activating your weather effect powers. Let's go over each of the effects. Number 1, Tornado. When activated, you'll remove an amount of trees from the board equal to the value of the tornado die. You can remove trees from any spaces on the board except trees from spaces adjacent to a water tile. You can choose to remove your own trees or your opponent's. Any of your own trees removed, you'll be able to plant as you normally would on this same turn. Any of your opponent trees will be returned back to them and held onto until their next turn, where they can plant them as normal. Once used, you'll discard this power at the end of your turn. Number 2, Cold Snap. This weather effect power will grant you the ability to freeze spaces, making them unplayable for several turns. The strength of the Cold Snap die will determine how many frost tiles you get. On any of your turns, you may place any number of your unused frost tiles on any empty space on the board. This space, as you may have guessed it, cannot be adjacent to a starting water tile though. You'll initially place the tiles frozen side up. They are now unplayable on until they melt. While there are frost tiles on the board, at the start of each of your turns, the frost tiles melt. If frozen, you'll flip it to the melting side, and if melting, you'll remove them from the board and back into the box. Once you've used up all your frost tiles, you'll discard this power. Number 3, Torrential Rain. This weather effect power will grant you extra trees for several turns when you flood spaces adjacent to your opponent's trees. You'll gain flood tiles equal to your Torrential Rain die's strength. When you first activate this power, you'll first place a rain die on the starting space of the tracker. This is the rain's lifetime, signifying how many turns it'll last. It'll always start at 2. Then you'll place each of your flood tiles on an empty space on the board. You can place on any space except the space adjacent to a starting water tile. Spaces with flood tiles are considered valid playable spaces, meaning players can plant trees on them. While the flood is active, at the start of each of your turns, you'll gain 1 tree for each space controlled by your opponent that is adjacent to a flood tile. This includes tiles on the flood tile itself. However, if a space controlled by your opponent is adjacent to multiple flood tiles, it only counts as a single space. After gaining the trees, you'll decrease the lifetime of the flood by 1. Once it reaches the final space, the flood dries up. You'll remove all of the flood tiles and discard your power. Number 4. Gusting Winds. These grant you the ability to plant trees farther away based on the strength of the wind gust for a single turn. When you activate this power, you may plant any of your trees up to the number of spaces defined by the wind gust strength. You may use multiple wind directions as long as they are all valid when planting a tree, and you may skip over your opponent's trees when doing this. After you've planted, you'll discard this power. Sunbeam. This ability grants both players an increased chance to gain extra trees. The value of the Sunbeam die is the strength the Sunbeam starts at. When you first activate this power, you'll place the Sunbeam tile on any empty space on the board. Every time the sun die is rolled by either player, you'll first check to see if the Sunbeam produces extra trees. If the sun die roll is less than or equal to the Sunbeam's strength, which is the current number on top of the tile stack, both players will receive one tree for each adjacent space they control. Now, if the value of the sun die rolled is greater than the strength, nothing happens. Regardless if players gain extra trees, you will add the next tile to the Sunbeam stack, increasing its strength by 1. Now when you go and add another tile to the Sunbeam in the step and there are no higher value tiles remaining, the Sunbeam has reached its maximum strength and fades away. You'll remove the Sunbeam stack and discard this power. Mudslide. With this power, you'll spread across the board through empty spaces and your opponent's territory, but at a cost. Now, the value of the Mudslide die determines the lifetime of the Mudslide, which is how long you'll stay active. When you first activate this power, place the Mudslide die on the space of the tracker that has the same value. Next, you'll place one Mudslide tile in any adjacent space to one you control that is either empty or controlled by your opponent. The wind is not used when placing Mudslide tiles. You can place them in any direction. You cannot, however, place this tile adjacent to a starting water tile. Next, you'll lay one of your trees from your active supply on the tile. If you place the tile on a space controlled by your opponent, you'll also lay their tree or trees back on top of the tile with yours. While the Mudslide is active, on any of your turns, including the turn you activated it, you may extend the Mudslide by placing additional connected tiles. To extend, you'll place a tile adjacent to any other Mudslide tile. The space must be empty or controlled by your opponent. Again, you do not have to follow the wind, and you cannot place adjacent to a starting water tile. You'll lay one of your trees from your hand on the Mudslide tile. You can extend the Mudslide as far and in any direction you want, as long as you follow these rules and have Mudslide tiles remaining. Now, Mudslide tiles with your tree on them are considered yours. This means you can plant adjacent to these spaces. Mudslide tiles with both players' trees on them are considered controlled by both players. This means either player can plant normally adjacent to them. You must follow the usual planting trees rules, following wind direction as you usually do for planting trees. Now at the start of your turn, before taking any actions, you'll decrease the Mudslide's lifetime by 1. You won't do this on the turn when you activate it. Now when the die reaches the final space, the Mudslide dries up. You'll first remove trees on the Mudslide tiles, returning them to their owner's bags. You'll then remove the Mudslide tiles and discard the power. Lastly, if the game ends with the Mudslide still active, you'll resolve the Mudslide before determining the winner. The spaces where the Mudslide tiles were will remain empty and unclaimed by any player. The only exception to this is in the rare case that a Mudslide resolution results in a Cascade. And that's the Wild Weather expansion. Lastly, we have Deciduous Duos. With this expansion, you can now play with up to 4 players, facing off in teams of 2. Your objective in this game is the same as the base game. The team who controls the most spaces at the end of the game will win. All base game rules apply, but there are a few twists. To set up this expansion, you'll first divide into teams. You'll either play as Aspens or Evergreens. After your teams have been chosen, make sure to sit across from your partner so that the order of play alternates between teams. You'll now set up the expanded game board. Follow this tile by tile placement, and by the end your board will look like this. You'll then place the 4 water tiles in these spaces. You'll draw 3 trees each and now seed your initial forests. When seeding your forest, you may now place more than one of your trees adjacent to the same water tile. What this means is each player will have 1 or more water tiles with none of their trees next to it. You cannot pinch though. What this means is when seeding your initial forests, you cannot surround a player from the opposing team between 2 of your team's trees. You may, however, opt to pinch yourself by placing one of your trees in between your opponent's trees. You'll grow your forest as usual, drawing an additional 4 trees and placing them on seeded spaces. You're now ready to play. You'll roll for wind and sun as usual. However, you'll now only gain trees when it is your turn and the turn of the player to your left. You will not gain trees when your teammate rolls or your opponent to the right does. In the plant tree step, you'll plant trees as you did in the base game, only being able to plant adjacent to a space you control. Spaces your teammate controls are not considered spaces you control. However, At any point during your turn, you may spend 2 of your trees back into your bag to gain 1 tree from your teammate from their bag. When planting your teammates' trees, you'll follow the same planting rules, placing trees in or adjacent to your teammates' trees, following the wind direction. Now, when checking for cascades, you and your teammate will pair up, meaning you can create cascades with a combination of both of your trees. Now, when filling cascades, you may use any trees of your choice between yours and your teammates. Just like in the base game, the game comes to an end when there's no remaining empty spaces on the board. At this point, you'll count up how many spaces each player owns. You'll add up the scores of both players in a team, and the team with the highest score wins.
And there you have it, Aspen, the cozy tiny forest game.
Do you have any questions? Leave them in the comments down below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
And if you found this video helpful, make sure you hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button if you're new here, because we love talking and chatting board games.
And hit that little bell, because then you know when our next videos come out and we can all partake in the joy of board gaming. Now, for our question of the day, if you could choose 2 favorite trees,
2.
what would they be? Because it's aspens. There's 2.
Oh, well, I feel like you have to pick an aspen tree.
If it's your favorite.
Birch tree, for sure.
Birch is pretty good. Well, thank you so much for watching.
And we'll catch you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.